Okay, we're going to continue now with paper 176 2.6 and continue on with the Lord's promises of a second coming as well as the destruction of Jerusalem. Let's go ahead and continue on.
And now concerning the travail of Jerusalem, about which I have spoken to you, even this generation will not pass away until my words are fulfilled. But concerning the times of the coming again of the Son of Man, no one in heaven or on earth may presume to speak. But you should be wise regarding the ripening of an age. You should be alert to discern the signs of the times. You know when the fig tree shows its tender branches and puts forth its leaves, that summer is near. Likewise, when the world has passed through the long winter of material mindedness, and you discern the coming of the spiritual springtime of a new dispensation, should you know that the summertime of a new visitation draws near.
Okay, so that's kind of what the Lord's talking about when he says, as you see the new branches come forth, then you know that summer is going to be near. Now we know that when we see the shoots start forth, it's usually a good 2 months before the summer really begins in earnest. But yes, you can see the signs of the times. Likewise, when the world has passed through a long winter of material mindedness, and you discern the coming of the spiritual springtime of a new dispensation. So also, I think that the Lord's long winter of material mindedness, many people want to attribute to the Dark Ages and such that were a part of the world, and thus they say to themselves, "We're in it. We with the restoration of the LDS Church and the Book of Mormon and many other movements, that was the springtime of a new dispensation." And very well that could be the case, absolutely. No one really knows whether he's talking about this or some other time, but you should also know that the summertime of a new visitation draws near.
But what is the significance of this teaching having to do with the coming of the sons of God? Do you not perceive that when each of you is called to lay down his life struggle and pass through the portal of death, you stand in the immediate presence of judgment, and that you are face to face with the facts of a new dispensation of service in the eternal plan of the infinite Father? What the whole world must face as a literal fact at the end of an age, you, as individuals, must each most certainly face as a personal experience when you reach the end of your natural life and thereby pass on to be confronted with the conditions and demands inherent in the next revelation of the eternal progression of the Father's kingdom.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I was going to share this, but I think I will, because it's important to understand. As Christ just expressed here, there's a significance here to the second coming of Christ. The second coming of Christ is closer to you than you think. Even if Christ doesn't come in the flesh, you will stand before him when you pass on to the next life, because you're now entering. You're standing in the immediate presence of judgment, i.e., Christ. He's not here to judge you necessarily. He's here to say, where do you stand in this new dispensation of service and the eternal plan of our infinite Father? Where do you stand with this? It's a judgment, absolutely. But it's as well an opportunity to make change, to say to yourself, well, I guess I wasn't doing that quite right, or I wasn't doing that right at all. But we must first and most certainly face, as a personal experience, when we reach the end of our natural life, we will pass on to be confronted with the conditions and demands that are inherent with this next revelation of the eternal progress. That same revelation of eternal progression of the Father's kingdom will be presented to us when we pass into the next life. So also be presented to the world. So what is that? Are we ready for the next life? Do we understand what is waiting us in the mansion worlds immediately thereafter? I don't think most of us do. And unless we've read the Urantia book, we're kind of in the dark as to what that means. So also I think the world is in darkness as to what that really means to accept, be confronted with the conditions and demands that are part of the progression of into our Father's kingdom. What does that mean? I don't think most people really understand. It is kind of what they're thinking, but it's more. It's more. Therefore, in order for us to face this, this is what I'd like to point out. In order for us to face that, we must pass through what? Death. An end of what was, and to be reborn into what may become. The world will go through the same thing. A death to what was, and a rebirth to what may become. That, I believe, in my own mind, is what this new dispensation is about. This new springtime dispensation, this opportunity when we get beyond this long winter of material mindedness. I have to ask the question, even during the Dark Ages, were people material minded? A lot of people were very subsistive. Absolutely. Subsistence farming. They were getting by with whatever they could. But most people went to church. Most people believed in what their pastors, what their bishops, what their individuals that led them in spiritual things told them. They believed it. They believed it firmly. It was not a time as much darkness as you might think. Material mindedness, they weren't so minded in material things. They were minded in trying to do right by God, but also by others, and it was a brutal situation in the Dark Ages, absolutely. But the church was still there. The gospel was still there, being taught, being preached, in sometimes a corrupted form. So that's what I'm saying, is that they weren't so material minded. Are we more material minded today than ever before? Do we have the opportunity for spiritual growth more than ever before? Absolutely. But are we also more material minded? This long winter of material mindedness, I believe, is just beginning and will continue. And that's what the future holds. It will be a great time of ability to understand spiritual things, but the majority of people will not seek for it because they will be seeking for material things, for the comforts of the flesh, for the comforts of this world, and not for God. That's what I wanted to share. Whether you believe it or not, that's my personal belief and perspective regarding this.
Of all the discourses which the Master gave his apostles, none ever became so confused in their minds as this one, given this Tuesday evening on the Mount of Olives, regarding the twofold subject of the destruction of Jerusalem and his own second coming. There was, therefore, little agreement between the subsequent written accounts based on the memories of what the Master said on this extraordinary occasion. Consequently, when the records were left blank concerning much that was said that Tuesday evening, there grew up many traditions, and very early in the 2nd century a Jewish apocalyptic about the Messiah written by one Celter, who was attached to the court of the Emperor Caligula, was bodily copied into the Matthew Gospel and subsequently added, in part, to the Mark and Luke records. It was in these writings of Celter that the parable of the 10 virgins appeared. No part of the Gospel record ever suffered such confusing misconstruction as this evening's teaching. But the Apostle John never became thus confused. As these 13 men resumed their journey toward the camp, they were speechless and under great emotional tension. Judas had finally confirmed his decision to abandon his associates. It was a late hour when David Zebedee, John Mark, and a number of the leading disciples welcomed Jesus and the 12 to the new camp. But the apostles did not want to sleep. They wanted to know more about the destruction of Jerusalem, the Master's departure, and the end of the world.
You know, it says there that the Apostle John never became thus confused, primarily because he was more an individual that would contemplate and ponder things. And he also had presented before he actually did the Gospel of John at the very end of his life, um, many other things. So, including the book of Revelation. So, these other things had been written long before the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John came at the very end of his life. Wasn't actually written by him, but it was transcribed uh, based on accounts that Nathan had discussed with him, so that they wrote that as the Gospel of John.
3. Later discussion at the camp. As they gathered about the campfire, some 20 of them, Thomas asked, "Since you are to return to finish the work of the kingdom, what should be our attitude while you are away on the Father's business?" As Jesus looked them over by the firelight, he answered, "And even you, Thomas, fail to comprehend what I have been saying. Have I not all this time taught you that your connection with the kingdom is spiritual and individual, wholly a matter of personal experience in the Spirit by the faith realization that you are a son of God? What more shall I say? The downfall of nations, the crash of empires, the destruction of the unbelieving Jews, the end of an age, even the end of the world, what have these things to do with one who believes this gospel, and who has hid his life in the surety of the eternal kingdom? You who
So Christ is saying, look, what do all these things have to do with you? Remember, your kingdom is a spiritual and individual one. It's a discipleship with Christ. It is a personal experience, an experiential, meaning experienced experience, where you actually go out and do the things you believe in order to gain and realize the faith uh, that you've put in Christ is not in vain. So you believe, you go out and you become a disciple. And that faith realization is what makes you spiritualized, makes you able to be in a spiritual kingdom. And even though you are still on this world and you're still waiting for the second coming, it's not the most important thing in your mind. It becomes, you're not looking for the second coming of Christ, but instead you realize the second coming of Christ has already come to you. That Christ has already come to you, into your heart and soul. And it doesn't matter when he comes, whether it comes today, tomorrow, the next week, or your lifetime or not your lifetime. It doesn't matter anymore to you. And I truly believe this. I feel this in myself. I used to care very much for, when will Christ come? When will Christ come? Trying to figure out when will Christ come. And then when I realized, when I grew, when I came across the Urantia book and I read it, and then I understood, and it became more expansive in my heart and soul, and I started doing the things that Christ commanded us to do, to love one another as I have loved you, to strive for that in my life, and strive to be his disciples. I found that I no longer cared when Christ came. It could come tomorrow, it could come the next day. I've heard of so many people say, I had a dream one time that I stood before Christ and it was the second coming, and I was scared and I ran and I wanted to hide. I was like, why? But see, I was in that same state too. But now it's like, I think to my mind, if Christ were to come in his glory right now, what would I do? I know what I would do. I would run out to greet him. I would run out. I'd be like, Lord, I know I'm not perfect. I know I've done so many things that just disqualify me of the kingdom. But yea, Lord, I know this. Whatever you want from me is what I want from me. When you can get to that point in your life, when you can say, Lord, my will is yours. Do with me as you will. I give you freely my soul, my will, all that I am. Imperfect as it is, it's yours. Do with it as you see fit. And then in your life, you seek for the guidance of the Spirit to guide you from one uncomfortable thing to the next uncomfortable thing so that you can become a disciple of Christ. Doesn't matter when he comes. It really does not matter when he comes in your heart and soul. You're already there. He's already there with you. I testify for this, and I thank you again for listening. We'll stop here.